My background, as you said, is marketing and social science. And so I was always interested in behavior to understand how to market to that. And I remember my very first lecture in marketing. The lecturer got up there in front of an auditorium of 700 students, and he said, "I'm going to tell you one story. And if you cannot relate to it, you'll need to leave the room." And he said that his uncle had owned a hairdressing salon for 25 years and he was selling $20 haircuts. He had a big sign out the front that said $20 haircuts. And across the road, after 25 years, there was a new salon opening up and they had a big sign, "We will be selling $5 haircuts." So he got a lot of pressure from the community and saying that, you've got to reduce your prices, Joe, because it's not competitive and people are going to go to the other hairdresser. So the day came where the other hairdresser did open and Joe took down his $20 haircut sign and he put up a new sign and it said, "We fix $5 haircuts for $20. And he said, "Welcome to marketing." And I remember being in that sort of auditorium at the time and I was thinking, wow, that's the power of perception. And so I've always worked with that and I've always been inspired by that. And where I worked in 2006 and 7 was for the largest telco company here in Australia. And we had 10 months to roll out 5,000 new sites and to market what was called the Next G network, which was the biggest 3GSM mobile network this country had ever seen and one of the first in the world. And it was very exciting. We got to test the technology. And I remember at the time, I was getting Australians excited about picture messaging and emails on the go. And I honestly, genuinely thought what I was doing was such a wonderful thing until after the rollout, when my husband started complaining about symptoms from the router. And he's just not somebody that often complains. And he said, "Just look into it for me." And so I did. I went into the research database, and what I found was 38% of my market were concerned about health effects. Now, as a marketer, that automatically triggers a campaign. You go, wow, there's this behavior, there's this concern, we need to address it. And so I went to my executive director at the time and I said to her, "We need to launch a campaign around safety." And at the time, I just thought there was no issue. There just needed to be an explanation. And what she told me in no uncertain terms was to get my foot out of the door. And that didn't work, obviously. So I went digging for more information and I went to the research department. I had a friend there and he took me out of the office to have a conversation with me because he didn't want to have it internally. And he said, "You're not going to believe this, but this is a self-regulated industry. And B, every mobile phone is being tested on a plastic mannequin." And I just remember my face just in shock because I didn't know how to take that information. He looked so serious and concerned. And at the same time, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I just never questioned safety. And that is something that most people don't understand. When it comes to safety, we just assume that it's there and we're using these devices under the assumption that there are regulatory bodies out there taking care of safety. And obviously that came with a lot of guilt that I carried for, close to 10 years because I literally left my job and the country within only a few weeks. I moved to Switzerland and I didn't come back for 9 years. And I carried a lot of guilt during that time. And I watched and observed them rolling out 4G and all the studies and the research that continued to come out and just thought, well, I don't have a big enough voice because even my colleagues, when I was telling them about the mannequin, they were just telling me just to look the other way because they had mortgages to pay and private school tuitions and the cognitive dissonance. I just couldn't be around it. And when I did leave, I came back 9 years later and I moved here to Byron, which is the heart of activism in Australia. And I got handed a Stop 5G flyer by one of our colleagues, Lynn. And at that time, I went to the booth and I had a conversation with the people in the booth. And Tashi gave me a call and recruited me into the movement shortly after it began. I think it was about 5 or so weeks after it had kicked off here in the Byron Shire. And we've been working together ever since. And the interesting part of this whole story is that I remember reading, Deborah, I think you were also on that research paper, and it was the underestimation, got to get the wording right, the exposure limits, the underestimation of absorbed cell phone radiation, especially in children. And when I read that study and I thought, that's it, this is the campaign that I have to do because this was the thing that got me to leave the company. And so I called up Tashi and I said, we've got to expose Sam, this dummy, and we've got to start a name. And we were tossing up, I am not Sam, or we are not Sam. And it's such an inclusive thing because we're all being, played on this front. And so we decided with We Are Not Sam, and we've been working on this campaign, and we've got incredible support from scientists all over the world, from yourselves, Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defence. And it's been an incredible journey of being able to give people the information that they cannot easily find because nobody's looking for it. And as soon as I tell people, Google SAR test, specific absorption rate test, look at the photos of this dummy, you'll see it in plain sight. It's just unbelievable to people that since the mid-90s, they've been testing on a plastic mannequin that represents a military recruit of a 6'2" tall adult male that only represents 3% of the world's population. And if we don't have safety in place first, how are we supposed to live in a world with safe technology? And that's the big question that we continue to ask, is we want to live in a world with safe technology. And right now, what we're faced with is a rigged test, which I know Deborah's going to get into, that has caused a lot of addiction and now is moving us into a world of surveillance. So at what point do we draw the line in the sand? And we always felt, Tashi and I, that it was with the 5G rollout, because there's 489 million 5G smartphones due to be rolled out this year in 2021. And we said, we've got to draw a line in the sand. This cannot continue with an untested, poorly tested technology. So I want to just, I need to take a breath because I feel like I could rant for an hour. But I figure maybe there's some questions just from that alone. But this is the inspiration. This is how I got to this point in the journey. And it's a calling. And I feel that this is never something that I thought I would do because I shied away from it for so long. But I realize now that this is a conversation everybody should be having. And it had to start with me.
Well, perhaps we can hear from Tashi about her journey because she began prior to you. And what was it that first got you interested and concerned about the issue?
Thanks, Deborah. So my background is multimedia, and I first signed up to be one of the first people in Australia to do a university degree based on multimedia. And that was in the late 90s. And I remember sitting there at my first lecture and them talking about the internet and that it was coming. And it would involve e-commerce, and it came from the American military as a communications network. And I thought, oh, wow, that's pretty amazing and out there. So I dedicated the next 4 years of my life to creating websites. And after about 4 years, I started to feel very, very unwell. Like I just felt very lethargic with the technology around me all the time. And so I like Renat, I did a bit of a runaway train, and I went to far north Queensland in Australia, which is, the oldest rainforest in the world, actually. And I did a bit of reflection there, and I thought, oh, I can't be around the technology all the time because I'm quite sensitive. And I was very hesitant in my peer group to get a mobile phone because I felt, just tingling in my hand. And, I felt if I held the phone up to my ear, like I had a little bug in there. So very early on my relationship to technology, I just felt that there had to be some precautionary measures. Like I always put my phone on airplane mode before sleeping because I found it disrupted my sleep. So I decided not to go back into that technology sphere. I decided education was more in alignment with my core values. And then I also looked into sustainability and what that looked like in, the current climate that we were living in. And I went back into the schools as a primary school teacher, and I was, I had the expertise of the, information technology knowledge, and it was very much embedded in the curriculum, and still is today, even more so than in the 2000s. And I was instrumental in the schools I was working in, bringing technology into the classroom. And I thought I was doing a really amazing thing, bringing that technology closer to us and interacting with it, with these young children, how amazing, how engaged they were. And then I went on a long-term maternity leave. I have two small children, 4.5 and 6.5. And when my children were infants, I just intuitively, like when I was feeding my children, I would always like hold the mobile phone in the opposite hand away from their head, because it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel natural to be holding my infant child with a mobile phone. But also, as you know, a young mother, and you know, it can be quite isolating, that chapter of your life, you know, with long hours and feeding. I also found that I was becoming more and more addicted to the technology. And I was quite late to get a smartphone as well. I only got a smartphone about 7 years ago because, again, I was hesitant. I was like, oh, you know, what impact does this technology have? Because, you know, it just doesn't feel right. And so I had a girlfriend contact me 2 years ago, and she was like, what is 5G? You know, I've just watched a documentary by Sasha Stone, and my mind is blown. And I was like, look, I haven't seen it. Send me the link. And after about 5 minutes of watching it, I was like, oh, okay, I need to look into this. And so then became a chapter of, you know, a couple of months where I started to look closely at what this 5th generation was. And what I realized really quickly is that it wasn't just an upgrade, it was an additional layer of infrastructure. And the alarm bells went off. Like, I just thought, well, how can this be? Because, you know, we're already, the technology is so close to our bodies. Like, do we really need more? So then, fortunately, a colleague of ours gave me Renat's phone number, and he said to me, you have to call this woman. Like, it feels really strong that you have to have a conversation with this woman. And then I remember, just like it was yesterday, and it was nearly 2 years ago, speaking to Renat on the phone, you know, with the mobile phone next to my ear, mind you, and her saying, you know, mobile phones are tested on a plastic dummy head, right? And my jaw dropped. And that was it for me, because up until that point, that piece of the puzzle I just wasn't aware. And coming from an educational background and, you know, a multimedia background with sustainability, I was like, that is just wrong on so many levels. And so began this incredible working relationship with Renat. Like, how do we create sound bites of solid, you know, scientifically backed information and cut through the white noise? Because what we are up against here is a lot of, you know, mainstream propaganda, and, you know, we're up against a beast here. So I'm always thinking of the most creative response and the most digestible information that we can, you know, give to people so that they can start, you know, being more informed around technology use. And what underpins that is, you know, that we want to live in a world with safe technology. So that's where, you know, our campaign is constantly moving towards that direction.
Well, I thank you for explaining your own odyssey. It's interesting that there's so much concern about 5G, but the reality is that all wireless technology is under some suspicion now, because the studies from the National Toxicology Program and from the Ramazzini Institute have found that low levels of radiation that can be emitted by current phones and current laptops is capable of causing cancer in animals and damaging DNA. And those findings are not widely understood. And as a consequence, I mean, if I said to you, I'd like you to take this toy and give it to your child, and by the way, it causes cancer in animals, you'd go, wait a minute. What we know about those results, by the way, is that every agent that causes cancer in people, for certain, will produce it in animals when adequately studied. So the idea that we are bombarding children now with this radiation has led us at Environmental Health Trust to develop a schools program, and we'll be releasing next week examples of letters that can go to your teachers. I think that for me, this has a bit of a kind of ironic and bittersweet quality, because more than 10 years ago, in 2009, I testified before the US Senate about exactly these issues. And at that time, I was excited about the possibility that trying to bring public attention to this would actually get some traction. You guys are amazing in what you have done. And I really want to salute you. I think that everybody on this call needs to go look at We Are Not Sam. And I have just recently written something about you to start the conversation, to keep it moving, because you need to understand that, and I would ask Theodora if you can put up one of the videos that we have showing the imaging of the brain. That would be, I think, very valuable. We have been working with Claudio Fernandez and Alvaro de Sales at Porto Alegre in southern Brazil, developing models of exposure into the brain using FDA-approved models. So we're using models that are currently employed by the Food and Drug Administration in our research. Those models are used by the FDA for brain surgery. I want to say that today I'm a bit saddened because one of my close friends who has been a brain cancer survivor, who's broken the records, he survived for 11 years, is now undergoing surgery for another tumor. And what I want to say is, we are not Sam, and we don't want more Sams and more brain cancer to accumulate before steps are taken to prevent this harm. And that's why what you're doing is so, so very important. Rinat, I'd like to ask you to talk a bit about the response you got when you began to raise concerns. I actually, in my book, Disconnect, I tell the story of a person, I think I say it's a person who, like you, was concerned because citizens were asking questions about where, in that case, about where the towers were going to be located. And the company had a plan, a brilliant marketing plan, to persuade churches that were also schools to allow them to put the antennas and the new disguised inside the church steeples. As close as it might be to children, it didn't matter. And when this person asked questions about that, this was somebody who was very senior in the company. They were basically phased out over a period of 2 years. So what happened to you, Rinat, when you first went to your supervisors? And talk a little bit about what, if I may say, what your job was in terms of how many people worked with you and what kind of plans you were able to develop until you realized this was really a problem.
Yeah. So, excuse me, at the time, I was working on the very first mobile film festival. And it was, encouraging students primarily to make films on their phones and submit them as part of a film festival. And I remember at that time thinking, wow, these campaigns that we get to do is just going to inspire the next generation of, creative thinkers. And that's what I thought technology was designed to, to be able to do. And when I came across this information with Sam and the information that was given to me, I went immediately to my core team. And I remember saying, listen, you're not going to believe this, but I just looked into it myself. But these mobile phones that we're asking these students and these university, we're talking university students to participate in is tested on a plastic dummy. But because of the excitement of this new campaign that's never been done before, a film festival for the mobile phones, just the feeling of it literally made, I think that's what you heard when I started coughing, is because it's still something that I struggle with, because these were people I'd worked with for so many years, had such incredible relationships with. But when it came down to questioning safety, the cognitive dissonance and the decision, the choice to look the other way because something seemed far more important, which may have been a festival or earning money or whatever it might have been, took precedence, or in other words, was a priority over safety. And I remember coming back visiting from Switzerland to Australia, and I would still see the colleagues that I was working with. and still they'd be working there. And that question in me, which is, at what point do you do the work that aligns with your value system? At what point do you put aside any type of fear of judgment and all of that sort of ego-based thinking? Put that aside for the greater good, because what you don't know, you can't change. So my question was always, well, now you know, why are you not willing to change? And that's a question that I still cannot answer till this day. Why people know certain information and they cannot move away to try to make it right. So at the very end, what ended up happening is I did have discussions with my manager, with my executive team. And as I write on the website, you know, there was a lot of stonewalling going on and warnings, and I was taken off certain campaigns because I was seen as sort of a troublemaker because I kept asking questions rather than just doing the work. And it became very clear within only just a few weeks that it was time for me to leave. And that's when, you know, I moved. I worked with, at the time, I mean, when I rolled out the 3GSM network in 2006 and 7, that was 8 people that I worked with. And that was a very, very tight team. And once we'd finished the rollout, you know, I continued working with that team on other projects. So it took 3 months before I realized that there was even any type of worry going on. And that was because of my husband. So of course, when you go back to 8 people, you're not going back to people you don't know. You're going back to people that you do know, that know where your integrity lies. And my husband at the time, we ended up having to remove our router. That was the best way for him to be able to sleep again. He was feeling itchy on his skin. That was one of the first things he noticed, and also his sleep. So we removed the router. And then after that, it was just a conversation that he and I had, which was, I'm not in alignment with what I'm doing and I have to leave. And I feel like I need to get away somewhere just to be able to process all of this and all these years of me promoting destructive technologies, essentially, without my even knowing. And so we left within, 3 weeks. I left my role, and then I think about 2 weeks after that, we'd moved all the way to Switzerland. So it was a very short period of time that I had to come face to face with the fact that I was running away from a problem, and it took a lot of running before I came back home, decided to face it. And that's what I'm urging people as part of this campaign as well, is to speak up now before it's too late, because we are approaching unprecedented societal change with what's coming in the Internet of Things. I mean, everything will be connected to the internet through microchips and antennas, everything from baby nappies to milk cartons to fridges to coffee machines. It's getting beyond anything that anyone could have ever predicted, especially myself when I was working at telco. It never occurred to us that it would go this far. And I think that this is the moment in our history where we have to use our voices. Otherwise, we will be toppled by this technology and all that it comes with.
Yes, we need to make clear that 5G is very vague what it really is. There's really, and it's actually an example where they're going to create it on the run. They're going to build it, and then they're going to figure it out. And so let's talk for just a moment. What 5G requires is the capacity to communicate with 3G and 4G devices, which is what most of us have right now. We're talking through wired computers. With respect to your mobile phone film festival, children should not be using phones generally. We know that. But if students in college are using phones, they should be using it on airplane mode. You can make a movie on airplane mode. There is no reason why it has to be instantly wirelessly connected. And we have information on our website at ehtrust.org that tells people how you can use more devices, how you can set up your home in a way that will be safer. And we want safer technology. We think it's more analogous to what went on with cars in the 1960s and 70s, where it became clear that cars needed airbags and seatbelts. And industry said, we can't do that. It will bankrupt us. And there were long debates, and they also carried on some very vicious tactics against those who were advocates for it, including Ralph Nader. But ultimately they failed. because there was enough data to support them and it couldn't be denied. In this situation, we do not want to wait for more data. We don't want to wait for more people like my friend to go through brain surgery in order to remove a tumor that came about from years and years and years of using the oldest phones in the heaviest ways, which did have a lot more radiation. But it's a mistake for anyone to think, as you have been told, that because 5G is weaker, you're going to be having less of an effect. It's not the strength of the radiation that we think is biologically important. It's the pulse of it. It's not the power of the radiation. It's the pulse. It's the irregular pulse over thousands of hours, over hopefully many years of lifetime, that will have an effect and has not been studied.
Absolutely. And you've just nailed it, Deborah, because everything that we do, we reimagine a better future. And Tashi and I make sure, because I mean, to sustain ourselves, to keep going, you have to keep reimagining a better future. And that better future is safe technology, but it starts with questioning bigger, better, faster. And that's the world that we're living in right now, where people believe that they need the next version of technology because we're getting, it's almost like society is expected to run faster. And that is the opposite of, slow food or slow technology. It's slowing things down so that you can actually be more aware of how you're using it, why you're using it, when you're using it. And that doesn't work with speed. That works with the opposite of speed, which is the reflection and the slowing down of it all.
I want to just say that it's not clear to me that 5G cannot exist anywhere. We need to be clear about something. 5G now is wireless. Basically, it has a fiber optic cable backbone that has to connect it. And it's only in the last 100 meters or so that currently configured to be wireless. We have advocated and continue to do that there should be fiber to and through the premises. What that would mean is that the military and medical and industrial applications, which may give them speed, which can be important, could be provided inside buildings with wired cabling. And that would be a great advantage. One dirty secret about 5G phones is that they cannot use 5G for voice. It's too short, it doesn't work, it's unreliable. And actually, in China and Korea, where there has been an attempt, to roll it out, as I've written in one of the op-eds that we can share with people on the call, China is turning it off at night. Why? Because it's an energy hog and very few people are using it. And that's what people need to understand. This is an experiment right now being carried out on us and our children. And the actual technology itself is still being ironed out. And that is why it's very important to work with people in the industry to encourage them to speak out about safer technology. There are safer ways for us to use this technology. And the most challenging will be the mobile voice. That will be the most challenging. But all the others, including, cars, if you want them, those can rely on what we have now, but we need to create more of a backbone of the fiber optic cable to make it more accessible and to use fiber to and through the premises. Theodora, you've been looking at what's going on internationally. And I think one of the things we note is that in Switzerland, there's been a very interesting discussion because the industry realizes that the current Swiss standards, which are more stringent than many countries, would not allow 5G. So there's been a full court press to try to change that policy. Where are we right now?
Well, as I understand it, the parliament decided not to increase the allowable levels of radio frequency in the environment. They have much stricter limits. They are not fully protective yet, but they're much more protective, certainly, than the United States and Australia and Japan and Canada. And the companies put in millions of dollars into an advertising campaign like they're doing all around the world, trying to promote the issue. And they did not, they did a research and they had a whole committee come together. They put out a report. The panelists could not all agree. So it had 3 recommendations. 1, bring the radiation levels to ICNIRP limits, or as Australia has. 2, keep them as they are. And 3, make them even more stricter and reduce them more. They decided to keep it as is. But now I heard, and the parliament said, we're not going to increase our limits to allow more radiation for 5G. But now there's some interesting things happening where they're reconfiguring how they're doing the measurements in order that will actually, as I understand it, can allow more power density. So there's a lot going on, but it certainly is a example of a country that is doing more than many other countries, especially in that they just did their report on oxidative stress, which found.
Let me mention that for a moment, please.
Yeah.
The Swiss government has a group of outstanding experts in toxicology and experimental work who, a standing committee called the Berenice Group, that advises the government. And this is, the people there are like the National Academies of Sciences. They are the top scientists in the country. And that group recently issued a very important report. They said, if you look at all the experimental data available, both cell culture work and studies in whole animals, they concluded that the evidence is compelling that current levels, that is to say 3G and 4G, that have been tested in animals and cell cultures, clearly cause a kind of damage that we know predicts the increased risk for cancer, neurological disease, and other serious problems. And because of that, in their recent report, which you can find, we'll put that into the chat as well for everyone, their recent report basically says children and those with pre-existing diseases are at special risk and should be protected from the exposure because this evidence is compelling that current levels of exposure can create this kind of damage called reactive oxygen species. You can think of these reactive oxygen species as cougars in the blood. They go around and they attack whatever is weak and they cause incredible damage. And the more of them that there are, the greater the damage that can occur. So from the point of view of these Swiss expert scientists, they have concluded that current levels are damaging. That's a very important finding from an expert group. I think what's happening otherwise in Switzerland is this. If you're averaging something, if you average something over 24 hours, you're going to get a very lower number. If you're averaging something over 1 minute, you may get a much higher number. If you're averaging something over a 1 gram volume, that's like a blueberry, you're going to get a different number than if you average over a 10 gram volume, like a strawberry. And we have to be aware that that is exactly what Theodore is referring to. That is what has been going on. Now, I'd like to say, we think your campaign is brilliant. And we'd like to, of course, when we are partnering with you to get your message out, what is that you want to do next with this campaign?
I'll jump in for a second. Yeah, so we certainly want to get out of the echo chamber because predominantly the campaign has been run off the social media platforms. And what we've found increasingly is that there is big censorship coming from big tech. So I just thought I'd shine a light on what's happening in schools at the moment. Last year, just at the end of last year, I decided to jump back into the real world and see what was happening in the schools. And I did a 5-week placement in a high school. And what I could see is that there was a lot of mobile phones in pockets, and at recess and lunch, the children or the teenagers were sneakily looking at their mobile phones. And then I went into the school policy, and it was quite clear in the school policy that mobile phones are not allowed to be used at the school. So I went to the teacher body and sat in at a meeting and said, look, I just wanted to, I'm new here at the school. I've only been here a week, but this is what I'm seeing. And I just wanted to check if it's in alignment with current practice, or if you do abide to your school policy. And so many of the teachers were quite shocked, and they were like, no, there's not supposed to be any phones. And I said, well, I guess maybe with fresh eyes, I'm just seeing it, everywhere in the classroom, hidden in pencil cases. And so I brought my little RF meter, and which, has just been an amazing tool for me over the last couple of years, because, we can't see this electro smog, but once you have, a visual, so many people are like, oh, wow, something is really here and it exists. So I did just a little professional development with the teachers around, how they could mitigate their own risk, like, take off your iWatch or, your earpods. And the school principal said, look, you're going to be here next week. It's the end of the year. How about you do a lesson for the students? So I thought, this is great, great opportunity to, get some research, but also to work with the children and see how they take this information about SAM. So a big part of our campaign for We Are Not SAM is around how can we empower people with the knowledge so that they can actually start engaging with technology differently. So giving them tools for behaviour change. So I brought this lesson into the classroom, and I actually showed your investigative piece, Deborah, with market research, I think it was, the Canadian show, where you actually, are talking about SAM. And, the children were quite shocked, but what happened from those lessons was the pushback from the parent body was quite surprising. I had to deal with, numerous emails from parents that were suggesting that, this was like a self-driven political move, and some other wild claims. But fortunately, the principal and the teaching staff were very, very supportive, because again, it was in alignment with the school policy around technology use. So one of the things that really we want to just keep supporting people with is what choices they can make. So the most common question is, what can I do? And so, if we're going to talk about the humble smartphone, like, here is just a component piece that, I'm totally hardwired in my house, but I use technology every single day to do this work. And my 6-and-up.
And would you mind to take a moment and just show them exactly what that is? Because I think a lot of people will be surprised. Yeah. So show your phone unplugged and then explain what you're doing.
Okay, sure. So I have my phone on airplane mode, with making sure that I have the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth off. That's most important, because even if you have airplane mode on, but you have the Bluetooth on, it's still going to be pulsing with the wireless radiation. So I also have the location settings off in privacy. Otherwise, the GPS is constantly tracking to satellites. So this is the information that we are breaking down into digestible, dot points. And that's what I love so much about Environmental Health Trust, is that you are also putting forward direct tools that people can, use. So this piece is an RJ45. It's an Ethernet component piece with the lightning cable for the, I have an iPhone, but you can get other pieces for different models. And I just plug it in, and I use the smartphone for calls, anything, streaming data, but it's all done safely via the Ethernet cable. So this is the sort of information that I was sharing with the students. I brought in these pieces and said, look, you've got Ethernet cables right there at the back of that classroom. You can use your technology safely. because, you know, more and more schools are enforcing a bring your own device policy, and this is very alarming for, you know, not just parents but also teachers that don't have the professional development to know how to mitigate risks around children that have never been safety tested for this technology. I mean, that's clear, they're not dummies. And yeah, it's just very, very concerning what's going on in the classrooms right now. And so, you know, not just from a teacher perspective, but also from a parent, you know, this is why I do what I do, really just so that we can start mitigating the risk with our most vulnerable. And my 6.5-year-old, you know, he knows how to use the technology. He puts it on airplane mode, knows how to turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth. And we have, you know, we don't use Bluetooth for music or anything. Everything's wired. But, you know, he's able to, you know, find an audio book, and everything's downloaded. So he doesn't have to be streaming data, and he can select his own music that he wants to listen to. So, you know, we're not technology, we're not phobic of it. We just are always choosing the most safe and secure way to use it. So I can't advocate more for fiber optic as well, what you were speaking into, Deborah, and that is really what we want to be pushing forward to the forefront of our campaign as well. As much as, you know, there is, you know, big energy around stopping something, we're also very much want to be aligned to the energy of a solution-based approach and putting forward solutions. So this might be a really good segue to you, Renat, to speak into, you know, what we're doing on the ground in terms of like giving visibility to the campaign in our own community.
Yes, I'll jump into that. So a lot of what we do, and Deborah and Thea, I'm sure you agree, is we're speaking into something that people cannot see. You cannot see wireless radiation. So that's part of the challenge. And what we've now just put forward are these signs, which are by 60 by 60 centimeters. They'll be bigger than this. They're quite large signs that our community, we've got a ground force here where we live in Byron Shire, we'll be putting these up. There's 5,000 that are being printed, been putting them up everywhere, so that maybe you cannot see wireless radiation, but you can see the signs. And being able to have those conversations. So if you see these signs on your neighbor's gate or outside your favorite, you know, organic food store, that you can strike up a conversation outside of the echo chamber and have those discussions. Because a lot of the issues that we face in this movement is that people don't want to speak up. People don't want to have conversations with their friends, family, communities, because they don't want to bring up a political discussion. And what we're encouraging is that discussion, you know, to do it open heart, you know, with an open heart and with an open mind, and be able to listen to people's concerns and also their understanding of this technology. Because I believe that, you know, what Deborah speaks into so well is that we already have the evidence that wireless radiation causes biological harm. I believe there's over 2,000 peer-reviewed reports that show there's biological harm from previous generations. And so we need to get us to a point where we can say, okay, these 5G devices that are coming onto the market right now, even the ones, you know, generations prior, these are remote controls. You know, these are effectively a remote control where you give your consent as to what type of technology or the speed or the use of that technology, because you've got a demand and they've got a reason to supply. So if we actually have a different demand, then we have a different supply. And so this message is very much around safe technology use and being able to ask the questions about safety testing, which we know doesn't exist, in order for us to be able to live in a world where we can use technology that doesn't impact our, you know, health, our well-being, our privacy, and many other topics that this conversation leans into.
Well, I think that I'm glad that you exist, and I just want to clarify one thing. GPS turning it off will, of course, give you more privacy because people cannot track you. But GPS itself is not the same kind of radiation. It is different, and we do not have any reason that I know of at this time to be concerned about the health impact of GPS. It's more the privacy issue. The other form, the other antennas on our phones. There are maybe 3 or 4 for data, for video, for photos, for voice. They are separate antennas. And one of the things that we can say is not only is SAM not relevant to the majority of people in the entire world. By the way, it was 3% of American military recruits, right? In the top 3%. So think about all the smaller people, people in India, people in South Asia who are much, much smaller. And SAM is not relevant to that as well. We know that SAM has a big, thick skull, like an adult male. And we know that children have thinner skulls with more fluid. And that is why we have published extensively documenting that children will absorb up to 10 times more radiation into the bone marrow of their skulls than SAM will. And in the hippocampus, which is absolutely critical to the development of memory and balance and impulse control, exposures can be up to 20 to 30 times greater. So we really need to rethink and reset what we're doing with our children and frankly, with the rest of us. Theodora, I think you want to jump in here.
Yeah, there's a few questions I wanted to add. And yes, the location, there's the location antenna, but you can turn that off and you can still use GPS, like I use GPS in my car with all the antennas off because it's actually receiving only with the GPS that exists. But so a question about routers, and I guess that goes to involuntary exposure. A person wrote about the routers, that involuntary exposure from being in an apartment or in a condo or in a place, which I had myself, where the next door neighbor had their router and all of their antennas right on the wall that we shared. And, how do we begin to address this? I know this is what we're doing. I'm wondering how you're addressing this issue in your community of involuntary exposure from these personal devices.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak into that. I mean, we've had cases where people in the community have found out about the wireless radiation from routers and have been absolutely horrified when they've realized that their office is adjacent to their child's cot and that the placement of their, router is, less than a meter from their infant baby's head while they're sleeping. So, it's a massive issue and so alarming. And the information that we put forward is, some ways to mitigate risk would be, to use a Faraday over a router. Like what I have is I put my own router into an old metal filing cabinet. And I just have the holes at the back for the Ethernet cables to come out, so that, it's not pulsing radiation. Even though I have no Wi-Fi in my house, the router can still be pulsing. And other things that, members of the community suggest and put forward, because, where we live in the Byron Shire, it is, people are quite awake. And I say that, with all due respect to, people that, haven't got this information yet. But, some people use like a Faraday while they're sleeping, which is essentially like a mosquito net or something like that, so that you can then, while you're sleeping, get the, best quality sleep. And, on your website, Environmental Health Trust, you have a wonderful page around how to create a sleep sanctuary with, so many different tips. So yeah, that's one thing that I would maybe invest in, is a sleeping canopy, so that you can't necessarily, or maybe even go and have a conversation and go and speak to your neighbours and knock on the door and explain to them if it's a possibility for them to turn off their Wi-Fi at night time, because it's going to help their sleep as well. I mean, most of the changes that happen are from conversations, and that's how I'm here today, is from a conversation I had with Renat nearly 2 years ago. And so, yeah, we feel like there's so much power in, this connection and sharing of information, because if we just withhold this information to look after our own and our own family, I mean, that's the best place to start. But also by sharing it is empowering people to, use technology safely as well.
We have to get the conversation started because what I did is I put shielding up professionally to make sure that I wasn't reflecting back other frequencies. But by talking to our neighbors, even if they don't do anything the first time, just speaking out, I mean, is beginning that conversation. So down the road, people who are ignoring it because they're only listening to what fits their own narrative at the time is going to shift, because they're going to go, oh, you know, this is the third person who's talked to me about that. Maybe there's something there. You know?
I want to add something though, if I may. You and we are in a position to be able to afford to buy these things.
Right.
I actually think that that's the wrong approach to advocate. I think people need to know how to take care of themselves. That's important. But why shouldn't poor people have the same access? And I think a few years ago, the Huawei company in China produced something called the Baby Safe router. And this was a router that turned itself off to the lowest level and only was on at the lowest power whenever it was needed. Now think about this on a global scale. Think about all the energy that goes into keeping routers on 24/7. Very few people, except for emergency responders and medical authorities, need to have things on all the time. It's just not necessary. And I think we can demand safer materials. I think we can demand that.
Or phones that don't even need, that you just plug and play to make them wired. Why don't we have that? Why don't we have devices where in one press we can turn off the antennas? That's what we need. We need devices that don't even need wireless, but as an interim, so we can just turn it off and at least have a choice. I mean, we have the hookups for the phones here too. I have a different one for different phones, but it's kind of complicated to figure it out, and it does cost a lot of money. It's an environmental justice issue as well, a critical one, which is why policy change is so important. We have to fix this and pressure companies, which is what you're doing, is bringing on the pressure to the companies. So.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We need to. We see this as a responsibility piece. This campaign is not about just pointing fingers at what and who's doing anything wrong, but it's about us reflecting and saying, hang on a second, if I'm going to be pointing the finger at someone that's giving me what I am essentially using every single day, then if I'm not willing to change my behavior around that, then how can I point fingers? So there's a responsibility piece in that. We know that they have designed this test in a way that, you know, it's a non-biological test. I mean, this SAM dummy doesn't have, you know, organs or the wire, you know, it doesn't take into effect the brain, etc. So we need to actually make sure that this industry is held accountable for their negligence. And I think this is amazing what Environmental Health Trust are doing with Children's Health Defence by taking the FCC to court and saying, you haven't changed this test in over 25 years. And I think there's also that responsibility piece on us as a community to say, right, we need to start reevaluating how we're using this technology too. So it's a two-pronged approach. You know, you've got to fire the right, you know, communication towards the industry bodies, but you've also got to fire the right communication towards, you know, everyday people using these devices. And that's how we've always approached it.
Well, we're grateful that you exist. I have just shared in the chat how people can support you through your GoFundMe page. And we would love to develop more programs with you. But I really want to say that at this point, I want to share an idea that came from a brilliant political figure that I once worked with when I was in the Clinton administration. And she taught me the concept of girlcots. Now, boycotts means no. Boycott means we don't want it. And they've been effective in history. They boycotted unsafe food for parents that did not want to give their children food contaminated with pesticides. We can have a girlcot which says to the manufacturers, we want safer products. Give us baby safe routers. Give us things that are designed to be the lowest level of radiation possible, because the technology has transformed our lives in many positive ways, and it's not going to go away. And as Renat said, we are not anti-technology. We're simply pro-health. We want to promote health. We also want to promote a restoration of basic family time. We want to promote the idea that when you sit down for dinner with your family, you don't have your phone with you. You don't look at it. There has to be sacred space, whether it's when you're in a religious or spiritual celebration, as I'm going to be joining soon for Passover, or whether it's for other things. We want to promote the idea that you can focus on what is happening now. And the technology, in a sense, has removed that from us because the technology can always interrupt us if it's on, then we are always not fully there. We're not fully present for our children, for our spouses, for our workplace. And that's something that we really have to change together. And we have to make the case for why women are leaders here, because we have always been the leaders of what goes on in the household. The very term economy comes from the Greek word oikos, which means home. And women generally still, unfortunately, control the home. That's why, by the way, in the United States today, employment of women is at the lowest level in 3 decades because of the pandemic. And because of that, more and more women are frankly trapped with the technology, and they need to get control of it so that it doesn't control them. And what you're doing is going to be very important for that. So we salute you. And I'll let Theodora wrap up this conversation. But frankly, after it ends, I'd like to continue chatting for a moment.
Great. So I have a few questions. Someone and a comment, which I think is really important and harkens back to what we were talking about, which I have to say, I was not aware that you could rent a wireless hotspot for $17 a month, but to get fiber optics or to get a modem or another kind of service in the home would cost 3 to 5 times that. So here's another example of how there is a equity issue when it comes to safe technology at this time that has to be changed. You asked, are there any low-cost options? But I think that depends on where, country and where we are. And I don't know the answer to that. If you want to put the country you're in, we can look into that, Patricia. Someone did ask, so this would be a great way to end our conversation. What are the results of the We Are Not Sam in Australia? Like, what has been the reception to the campaign, and what's next?
Tasha, did you want to, or shall I speak into that?
Go for it, Renat.
Okay. So what's happened so far is that we're getting quite global attention in terms of our petition. So we've got a petition on our website that we would encourage everybody to sign, and that is very clearly a boycott 5G phones petition, and all the reasons why we need to draw the line in the sand before it goes any further. But also we're engaging community, and we've done what's called a strategy kit. So Tashi spearheaded a strategy kit, which is 44 pages that you can find on our website, wearenotsam.com, that can give you the tools and all the necessary information to be able to look into and start working with your communities on this topic. And I think that's really important. It's a massive direction that we're taking with this campaign. Is we are working on a community to community to community basis. Everything that we do, we expect that what happens here dominoes to other communities, and you have to start local first. And this is something that we heavily engage in, is our local community, and making sure that once the local community are behind what you're doing, it can go global. So that's where our success has been so incredibly profound, is that the local people here have helped fund this campaign, have also got us in touch with all the key players that we work with influencers, with the wellness industry. This is a $4 trillion industry, the wellness industry. And what we know is that in a world with 5G, in effect, the world that we have now with 4G, that's not conducive to wellness. So this is where we're really targeting our future to go into the wellness industry for this campaign and say, let's work with some of the biggest wellness brands and some of the biggest retreats in the world and get them behind this campaign, get them to understand that they have to also speak up against what is happening and also what can happen, which is the positive element of this. So the wellness industry is where we've also done an incredible short film that speaks into Mother Earth, and it's a short film that speaks about Gaia, which is a Mother Earth sort of entity, and she's running through the forest and comes across a device, and it's what you see in the most beautiful natural settings we have in our world, whether you're in a forest or if you're near a waterfall or at the ocean. These are the places that we feel that we are regenerating, where we feel connected with nature. But when we have 42,000 plus satellites, in low to medium orbit, blanketing our Earth with technology where we cannot escape from it, like we can, at least for now, we've got to start questioning what is our connection to the Mother Earth and what is our connection to nature? And is that connection more important than our bigger, better, faster connection to technology? And those are the types of questions we're going to start asking our audiences, because we've spoken into the science, we've spoken into all of the corruption, and now we're speaking to the heart. We're speaking to the heart of the matter, and that is your intuition. And everybody that we come across, almost everybody, I should say, their intuition says it's getting too far. It's going too far. It's not right. And we've got to lean into that. We've got to lean into indigenous wisdoms of what connection and what nature really looks like, and start to reevaluate. Because one of the things one of the indigenous leaders here where we live, where Tashi and I live in the Byron Shire, Jambi, he says that 5G is simply a disconnection. It's a symptom of our disconnection with nature. It's a symptom. So I feel that moving forward, if we can get people to reconnect with what is real, we're setting ourselves up for a future, not only with safe technology, but also with the basic levels of connection, which we've lost because of technology.
We are exactly what Margaret Mead once said. Never, never underestimate the power of a small group of determined citizens to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that does. And I want to thank you both for taking the time to talk with us. And I really, really look forward to what we may do next. Thank you.